Hello, and welcome to our lecture on the pesticide label. Being able to read a pesticide label properly is a critical component of providing safe and effective lawn care treatments. It's also a critical component of some licensing exams you'll be taking in Connecticut, New York, and probably some other states. Now, there are four main categories of information on a pesticide label, and we'll be going over all of them here today. These include product information, safety information, environmental protection information, and directions for use. Being able to search the label quickly for relevant information will help you in your day-to-day responsibilities as a pesticide user. But it will also help you on the licensing exams when you're given a pesticide label and expected to quickly answer questions about it. So let's get started with the section on product information. The first thing you'll see when looking at a pesticide label is the trade name or the brand name. And this is what it's most casually called by salespeople and even professionals who work with the products. Brand names or trade names are easy to remember and often catchy, like Speed Zone or Battleship or 7 with an I instead of an E. But if you look a bit closer at the label, you'll see that there's also a common name, which is less often used or less commonly used, ironically. So the brand name of Speed Zone, for example, contains a chemical whose common name is 2,4-D. Now, 7 is a brand name or trade name, but its common name is carbaryl. But if you look even closer, you'll see that there's also a chemical name that's very rarely used, and probably only by the scientists who formulate these products. The chemical name for 2,4-D is 2,4-dichlorophenoxyacetic acid. And the chemical name for carbaryl, remember that's the common name for the brand 7, is 1-naphthyl N-methylcarbamate. So each pesticide product typically has several names that can be used to refer to the same exact thing. The trade or brand name is the easiest one to remember and use, and you'll sometimes use the common name when you're discussing the product with salespeople or others in the industry. And you'll probably never really use the chemical name, but it's at least important to know where you can find it just in case you need it for some reason. All these different names can be found in the ingredient statement. Now, it'll have each of them listed, as well as the percentages of each one in the actual product you'll be using. This can also be important to understand because you may have two different brand names that have the exact same common or chemical name, so they're essentially the same product even though one is called, let's say, Roundup and the other is called Touchdown, an actual example. But before you decide to buy the less expensive one because you think it's the same thing, make sure to look closely at the amount of the chemical that's in the product. One of the two might actually be much more concentrated than the other. So it may be a much better deal, even if 1 gallon of that one is more expensive than 1 gallon of the other one. You may also find something called the use classification statement on the pesticide label. This explains what the product can be used for and what it cannot be used for. Now, this statement is required for any restricted use pesticides or products that only licensed professionals can purchase. If you don't see the statement listed, you will be able to find sections on the label for the various potential uses like agricultural use or lawn and turf use. You'll need to know whether or not the product is labeled for your use before you purchase and start using it. The type of pesticide will be listed prominently on the label as well somewhere. This could be insecticide, herbicide, fungicide, rodenticide, or even something else. You should know what you're purchasing, but always first check this just to make sure you're getting something in the right category. Now, every insecticide will not work on every insect, so it isn't nearly enough just to know that you're buying an insecticide or something like that. But you certainly don't want to be buying an insecticide for a weed problem, let's say. The name and address of the manufacturer will also be on the label, often with a phone number, and this can be really helpful, especially if you don't fully understand some of the words on the label. Let's face it, these labels are meant to be useful, but they're also written by scientists and lawyers who often enjoy using words that you'd never hear in normal conversation. So if you don't understand any part of a label, just pick up the phone and call that number. That's why it's there. The EPA registration number will usually be clearly on the front page as well. While you probably won't need this while you're using the product, it's important to know where it is for reporting purposes. The number starts with EPA Reg number. Makes sense, right? But also on the label will be an EPA establishment number, which is different, and it's important to not mix those two up. The establishment number refers to the facility or the establishment where the product was actually made. So if there turns out to be a problem of contamination, let's say, with one batch of this product, the establishment number will help investigators look into where it was made, and this will start with EPA EST number, establishment, right? Okay, so that covers the product information section. Now it's time to go over the safety information. First and foremost, you're going to want to look out for the signal words and symbols. There are 4 possible signal words, and these will tell you just how toxic or dangerous a product is. Danger, poison with a skull and crossbones. Now that's the most toxic stuff and should never be handled carelessly. Well, okay, no pesticide should ever be handled carelessly, but this stuff is the most dangerous of them all. So really be careful here. Now, at our company, we don't really use products that are in this category in the normal course of doing business, but they do serve their purposes. Just make sure you know what you're working with. Number 2, slightly less toxic but still a little dangerous, says danger. That's the second most dangerous product, and therefore should also be handled with extreme care. The next word is warning. Now this is a product of moderate toxicity. And the final one is caution. Now that's put on pretty much everything else. Now it's always important, as I stated, to be careful with any kind of products that we're using. Those products carrying the word caution as a signal word are generally very mild and pretty safe when they're used properly, so just use them properly. One final point on signal words. Your risk is dependent on 2 different things: toxicity and exposure. You can learn the toxicity of something by the signal word on the label, but even a very low toxicity product can be dangerous and can pose risk to you if you are exposed to it unsafely. So if you get it all over your bare hands, or you breathe in a heavy dose of the vapors, or you get it in your eyes, that's a very high exposure, and that increases your risk a lot. So always be careful. You cannot control the toxicity of a specific product, but you can take care to minimize your exposure. Next in the safety section is the precautionary statements. Now, this section may not actually be labeled precautionary statements. It may say something like hazards to humans and domestic animals, or something along those lines. But this is the section that shows you how to protect yourself and others by using the product safely. Some products may be highly flammable or highly corrosive. If so, it's really good to know that. You'll find that these physical or chemical hazard statements in this section. Now, if it's flammable, don't use it near an open flame. If it's corrosive, it can only be stored in specific types of tanks. Those are things you need to know. Now, take a look at the routes of entry statements. Routes of entry refer to how a pesticide may enter your body. You could swallow it or breathe it in, or it could enter through your skin. On this section, it will tell you if a product is, let's say, harmful if swallowed, or even fatal if inhaled, or extremely hazardous by skin contact. Think about nicotine patches just for a minute. Now, many people who want to quit smoking will wear a patch on their skin that contains nicotine, which, by the way, is actually a natural insecticide. So if you're a smoker, you're literally breathing in pesticides every day. But these patches work because the nicotine can be absorbed through your skin. Other pesticides can also be absorbed through your skin, which is why it's considered a route of entry. So if you do spill it on your skin, your hands, your shoulders, your back, make sure to wash it off quickly before it has a chance to get into your bloodstream. The best way to protect your various routes of entry is to read the section on personal protective equipment, often also known as PPE. This will include information on gloves, respirators, suits, boots, and other forms of personal protection that can greatly reduce any risk by greatly reducing your exposure. Remember to always exercise common sense. Wash your skin if you ever get pesticides on yourself. Wash clothing well after it's been used for pesticide applications. But even if these things don't seem like common sense to you, they are on the pesticide label, under other precautions. So what should you do if you spill a pesticide or accidentally splash it on yourself or get some in your eyes? Well, make sure you're well aware of the first aid section. Keep in mind that you may actually accidentally get some in your eyes at some point, and that's very rare and very unlikely as long as you're careful. But if it does happen, you probably won't be able to read the first aid section if you've got pesticide in your eyes. So make sure to read it ahead of time so you know what to do just in case. This section will cover how to handle accidental exposure, but any pesticide with a danger signal will also have directions for a doctor called Statement of Practical Treatment. Again, familiarize yourself before using the pesticide. A doctor will need to know how to treat the exposure as quickly as possible, so knowing where to find that information will be critical. If the pesticide does not have the danger signal word, it won't have this Statement of Practical Treatment. But the first aid information will tell you all that you need to know on how to handle the situation. If you need it, there will also often be an emergency telephone number on the label. This is pretty self-explanatory. If you're uncertain of how to handle a situation, just pick up the phone and call. That's why it's there. Finally, the safety information section, you will find the re-entry statements when it's safe for people to re-enter an area after the pesticide application. Now, keep in mind that a lawn care company, we place a 24-hour sign at the end of the driveway after each application, but that may or may not reflect the truth of how long someone needs to stay out of the area before re-entering. So take a look and make sure you know when that 24-hour sign is sufficient or not. If the period is actually longer than 24 hours, make sure to let the client know that. It's rare, but it does happen. Re-entry periods can also vary from use to use. So non-agricultural use, for example, may say, do not re-enter the area until the product is dry, while agricultural use may advise a full 48 hours. Since a home lawn is a non-agricultural use, it may only take a few hours for the product to dry, so re-entry after that would be fine, later in the day. And they don't need to wait the 48 hours that a farm worker might need to wait. Okay, so now we know about the product information and the safety information. The next section we deal with will be the environmental protection information. The first part of this section will be the special toxicity statements. Now, some products may be highly toxic to fish, or bees, or birds. Well, it's important to read this statement so that you know whether or not you should be applying the product while you're near a pond or near a beekeeper's property. The second part of this section will have some general environmental statements that should really be common sense, but read them through anyway. This section might include statements like, do not apply when runoff is likely to occur, or do not apply directly to water. Keeping the environment safe is a primary responsibility to any of us in the turf care industry. Poor environmental practices will only result in stricter laws, fines, punishment, and potentially shutting down of businesses. So make absolutely sure you know where that information on the label is. The final section we'll be talking about is actually the largest section on the entire label. It's the directions for use. This section typically starts with a warning that it's a violation of federal law to use this product in a manner inconsistent with the labeling. I actually used to think that was kind of funny because it seemed like that was the whole directions for use. But that's only the beginning, and it's a fair warning. You cannot legally use this product in any way that is not shown on the label. First, understand that proper storage is important for both safety and effectiveness purposes. For example, if you have a bottle of something stored in the back of a van or a pickup truck through the entire winter, when it clearly states that it must be stored at temperatures above freezing, you'll have a problem. The product likely won't be effective the next season when it thaws out, and you'll have wasted money and created a useless waste product that you'll need to then find a legal way to get rid of. Speaking of disposal, never reuse the containers. Now this will also be clearly stated on the label. The containers must be thoroughly rinsed out with all the rinsate, all the water in the rinse going into the machine, the tank that you're pouring the pesticide into, then destroyed by punching a hole in it with a screwdriver or some other implement so it can't be reused, then thrown away. Also note that certain states have laws that are more strict than the EPA regulations and what's listed on the pesticide label. It's your job to make sure that you follow the strictest laws that apply to that product and its use. While the EPA may allow a certain product on a home lawn, the state of New York or Massachusetts may not. Remember that you need to follow the strictest of the two laws when they don't seem to be in agreement with each other. So, when should you read a pesticide label? One word: before. Before buying the pesticide. You need to be careful that you know what it is you're buying and that it's legal for your needs. Before mixing and applying it. Before storing the product. Before disposing of unused pesticides and empty containers. In conclusion, remember that a pesticide label is a legal document. Violation of any part of it is actually punishable by law, either civil or possibly criminal. Familiarize yourself with the pesticide label and make sure you're using the products properly, effectively, and safely. Thank you.